In the name of the one who is unity in person. Amen. Please be seated. On June 16, 1858, senatorial candidate Abraham Lincoln addressed the Republican convention in Springfield and warned, "The nation faces a crisis that could destroy the Union." Speaking to more than 1,000 delegates in an ominous tone, Lincoln paraphrased a passage from the New Testament. "A house divided against itself cannot stand." The issue dividing the nation was slavery's place in the growing Western territories and the extent of federal power over individual states' rights. Lincoln declared that only the federal government had the power to end slavery, while the southern states relied on an economy and lifestyle dependent upon the cheap labor provided by African American slaves. The North opposed slavery on moral grounds, even though the North as well, its entire economy benefited from relations to the slave trade, having one of the families from Rhode Island being the largest slave trading family in the history of this country. The northern states also considered industrialization and manufacturing as key to America's economic future and not farming. For his part, Lincoln firmly believed that slavery was immoral and was wholly incompatible with the principles of the Declaration of Independence, embodied in the phrase, "All men are created equal." However, Lincoln prioritized preserving of the Union above all else. There are three accounts in the Gospel of Mark, Matthew, and Luke, in which Jesus states that a kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, or a house divided against itself cannot stand. All three instances of this statement are spoken in response to the Pharisees' accusation that Jesus was casting out demons by the power of Satan. Jesus' argument to the Pharisees was logical. A kingdom that is at cross purposes with itself will fall. Any household riven by infighting will tear itself apart. Jesus was obviously casting demons out of people. However, if Jesus was in league with Satan, or if Satan was somehow working through Jesus, it seems unlikely that exorcisms would be a priority, because why would Satan cast himself out? Satan has more practical wisdom than to allow his demon underlings to group themselves into warring factions. By saying that a house is divided and cannot stand, Jesus is illustrating the fact that success relies on congruency. This is something that you and I see in daily life all the time. Whether is it a machine, a well-oiled machine, a sports team, an orchestra, a government party, a family, or one's own mind, things have to work together if anything is to be accomplished. It is important to say, however, that being of one mind is not the same thing as total agreement. I think we often forget that the richness of a community is that it is inherently diverse and contains diversity within it. This means there is room for difference that should be celebrated as a strength and not as a liability. What is not acceptable that divides a family, a community, or a nation is a lack of willingness to listen, to deeply value the ideas of one another, particularly those who are different from us. In our day, In our national discourse, the issues at the heart of the division lie principally much along the same lines of what Abraham Lincoln spoke about 163 years ago: divisions around slavery and race. While slavery is illegal, the effects of it and the systems perpetrating a lower and upper class based on race are very much alive and with us still. My friends, as you know, I've been on a journey to discover and learn more about the histories in our country. Delving deeply into a variety of stories and histories has not canceled out the history I was taught in school. Rather, understanding that there are many and differing stories in our local, state, and national story have only expanded my understanding of the experiences of people who are different from myself. There is not just one story in history, but many, many stories and truths based on lived experience. Looking into the systems created in the past that continue to inform the present have provided a window into understanding things as they really are, not as I wish they were or thought they were, but as they truly are for millions of my brothers and sisters who do not experience the America in the way that I do. I've told you more than once that I would rather not have had to do this work. Yet, once I began, I could simply not look away. The reality of millions of people in this country for centuries are being laid bare before us in real time. I invite you to just consider what we all learned this past week during the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre. I know I never heard about this in school, and just this week, for the first time in 100 years, our country learned the truth of what happened in this place. And delving honestly into that history, we learn that there was no crime committed by the black residents of Tulsa. There was a specific charge against a 19-year-old black male that was said to have assaulted a 17-year-old white girl who was running an elevator at the time, which was never really proven either. The larger question is, why would one charge against one person lead to the wholesale slaughter of hundreds and the destruction of 35 blocks of homes, businesses, schools, and churches? What crime could have caused this kind of mass hysteria? It seems more logical to me that this frenzy was whipped up because the black community was overreaching in their success. They were not staying in their place. It was called Black Wall Street for a reason. This community modeled what could be accomplished when folks of color came together to realize the American dream for themselves, and they couldn't handle that reality, others in the community. Having created this thriving community of black Americans, white extremists used the charge against the 19-year-old to launch an all-out attack against this community to destroy what they had built and accomplished. Citizens were deputized to destroy the entire community in the Greenwood neighborhood, killing hundreds whose bodies were buried in mass graves that are just now being unearthed 100 years later in Tulsa this very week. God commands unity among believers because once conflict enters the midst of an assembly or entity, productivity and usefulness inevitably grind to a halt, and the whole organization is weakened and becomes vulnerable to attack. As Jesus said, any kingdom divided against itself will be ruined. A house divided against itself will fall. The message of Jesus today is critical in our time. One way we can begin to understand why things are the way they are is to open up our minds and our hearts to a variety of stories and histories that most of us have no idea about. I know I certainly didn't. Being open to the lived experiences of others is a way to both honor the dignity of each and every human being that we promise in our baptismal vows, and to bring reconciliation to a land that is desperately in need of redemption and healing. Toward that end, I am getting ready this week to submit the final grant proposal to bring some of these histories to life to the people of the wider Hebron community that would begin in the very late fall of 2021 on Monday evenings in our parish hall every 2 weeks or so for about 5 months. Folks will be able to register in advance and participate in what will be an 11-session program called This is Sacred Ground, adding one more session to a 10-session program that focuses specifically on some of the history here in Hebron, and facilitated by 2 professors whose life work in this area of racial reconciliation and understanding will awaken in each of us something new to consider. We will take a deeper look into the stories of Native American communities, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, African Americans, as well as white communities, all of whom have suffered as a result of unjust economic and racial policies throughout the history of the nation, specifically designed and intended to keep those groups apart from one another. I will tell you up front, and I can probably speak for Marianne Hickleton, who went through this with me, that this will not make you feel better doing this work, but hopefully, like it did for me, it will have the power to change perspectives and open hearts and minds as it did mine. May we recommit ourselves more deeply into understanding the world in which we live and what we can do to further bring about the reconciliation and restoration of this world as God intended it to be, and end this division that remains a destructive poison in our land, and let it begin with each of us. As the poet Stephen Levine once wrote, and you'll know these words, "Let there be peace on earth," and what? Let it begin with me. I close now with a Franciscan benediction that is one of Pope Francis's favorite. May God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and turn their path into joy. And may God bless you and I with enough foolishness to believe that you and I can make a difference in this world, so that we can do what others claim cannot be done.